Hi, and welcome. We're Team D, and this is our configuration management service presentation. I'm Cesar Venegas.
I'm Luis Vergara.
I'm Edgar Reyes,
Heidi Song.
Elizabeth Rueda.
Jesus Rivas.
and we're Team D.
The following content will be addressed in our presentation. The use case diagram, the N-square matrix, the WBS, also known as the work breakdown structure, the affinity diagram, the stakeholder influence map, the indicator for CM systems, the DAR, also known as the decision and risk analysis, and finally, our configuration item and baselines template.
I'm going to explain the use case diagram. The purpose of this diagram is to identify the interaction between all external actors and the services provided by the system. For this diagram, it's very important to keep the format because this way, in the future, anyone familiar with this diagram can understand the information that is provided. Some of the actors we identify are customer, third-party accounting, customer management, customer service, and database. Just as an example, for third-party accounting, the two services we identify is the transfer of payments and generate bills. Next, I'm going to explain what an N-square matrix is. The purpose of this matrix is to identify what is the relationship between the external and internal actors of the system. After we identify the internal and external actors, we need to identify what are the relationships between them with an arrow in the upper and lower diagonal. After this, we just need to explain for each coordinate what are the relationships so everything is understandable for the matrix.
Now we're going to talk about the work breakdown structure. The purpose of a work breakdown structure is to deconstruct a product into the management components or parts. The further you break it down, the product, the more in depth you go into each component and onto its subcomponents. This in return helps refine the responsibilities of the components and their subsystems into organized branches, which can then help with cost, risk, and time. In the following slides, we will show the work breakdown structure we use for our CM service project. First, we started decomposing our work breakdown structure. We began with the project management team, which has the project manager, budget analyst, risk analyst, quality analyst, systems engineer, security analyst, software engineer, user interface engineer, and the system architecture. Later, we have the website, which has the interface, backend, security, content, software architect, and the testing. Later on, we have the servers, which breaks down into the power, the network, security, testing, and the server architect. And finally, we have the database, which breaks down into the database architecture, security, and testing.
The purpose of an affinity diagram is to organize data and ideas using a systems thinking approach. We were tasked with creating an affinity diagram outlining the functions of our configuration management system. The first step that we undertook was a brainstorming process in which we came up with ideas and concepts such as establish integrity, create hierarchy, track and control change, and other various ideas. The next step was to organize them into similar groups. For example, the functions we organized into similar groups. The next step was step 3, labeling these groups. As I stated before, the functions were grouped together. Other various ideas that we talked about during our brainstorming activity came out also, such as accounting, personnel, customer support, and software. The fourth step, we took a deeper look at what we came up with our brainstorming process, and we realized a lot of them were not functions. So we undertook the process of removing these functions. And as you can see, we kept our group of functions. The final step was to elaborate and group these functions again. So this was the final affinity diagram for our configuration management service, in which you can see we have the document control, data handling, product consistency, control, change control, and communications all grouped together.
So hi, I'm gonna talk to you about the stakeholder influence map. First of all, I'm gonna tell you I wanna discuss what a stakeholder is. Basically, a stakeholder is a group or an individual that's affected or is in some way accountable for the outcome of an undertaking. A stakeholder influence map tool is used to identify, organize, and document system stakeholders and the interactions that exist between them. So, how do you do the SIM in 4 steps? Well, step 1 would be brainstorming. All the potential stakeholders for the system of interest. And at first, it's better to do it in a team, and at first your ideas are gonna be just scattered everywhere, as our example. So step 2 is to actually group them based on similar or common views or requirements. These groups should be given a collective name. In our example, we met all the criterias. So step 3 is identifying and documenting the influences. So the influences, what we did here is we set the hierarchy, 0 being the no influence and 5 being the most influential. So the 4th step is actually mapping mapping it, and you have to decide 4 things here: which stakeholders you must get a requirements from, which ones can be ignored and why, and which groups of stakeholders should you get the requirements from.
Hello, I'm going to present the indicator template. It is a tool that the Software Engineering Institute has developed. It can help an organization to define indicators or graphical representation of measurement data. This powerful tool can allow us to, for example, document the information required to define a metric, its operation definition, how to interpret the information, hints for analysis, the information needed that address, and its related business objective. Some of the problems that we can avoid by using this tool is, for example, missing the big picture, inconsistent definition of measurement data elements, or chart indicator misinterpreted. For example, this is the indicator template. Some of the questions that we have to address to make it are, for example, how many change requests were approved, how many requirements are impacted in each approved change. Here we can see the graphic that represent the answers that we have in the questions. Some of the other important section of this indicator are the data elements. These are the other section of the interpretation. For example, how often the security that we have for the data, the algorithm that we use to create the columns, assumption, interpretation, probing question to see if our indicator it's address the question that we have. And the last section is here. We have the evolution, feedback, guidelines, and X-reference.
Hello, this is the DAR, also known as a decision and risk analysis. This is used to help us choose between alternatives in the best possible way. In this example, we're going to use it to choose a CM24R system. The first thing we got to do in a DAR is define a set of criteria for the alternatives and the weight that this criteria have. Next, we go and find alternatives and weigh them according to criteria. And our software gives us the matches of the alternatives to our criteria. We then get the 3 top matches as long as they're within 10% of each other, and we apply the risk analysis, which consists of finding the conditions of the risks and the consequences of such risks, as well as their probability. By assigning the probability of each of the alternatives that are left to the risk, we get a new recalculation of the match. Finally, we get the winning alternative, and in this case, it's PowerShell, and it helps us in a way to find the best alternative out of the 5. Although I will be speaking about configuration items and baselines. Here we are going to define how we're going to think of our baselines and the audits that we're going to use to make sure that our baselines are in order. The first step is to identify which work product items we will use when coming up with new baselines, as well as whether they're in the repository, whether they have different versions, and whether we can control and change them at any point in our project. Then we get to define the name of the baselines and when we're gonna make a new baseline, which items we're gonna use and which work products we're gonna use. Then we will have to use a way to audit our baselines. In this case, we write certain questions to probe our baseline, whether it's good or not. And we also ask a couple more questions about our configuration management system. For example, can we back up to the last baseline? Is the new baseline completed? Does it have significant changes? And can it be recreated once it's implemented? Thank you.
We've now reached the end of our presentation. In conclusion, these are the diagrams and templates that we've used to provide configuration management services. Thank you so much.